everyone, Witchboy Columbus here. I am making a video today to touch on the subject of blended paths and my thoughts on it. Now, there's been a kind of controversial thing going on, like it's been a controversial topic, and I figured I'd weigh in as my opinion only, and kind of play like the advocate between two, and because I kind of see both sides. And I think that people are getting really hung up on some stuff that, if we think about it, probably really isn't that big of a deal. But I wanted to weigh in. Now, people have been making videos about blended paths recently and touching on this subject in a more not direct way, but I'm also referring to the video put out by Lilokin, who I'll put in the down box, and he's actually had two about it, and one was the notion of Christa Wicca. Okay, so I'm just going to talk. So when I think about the blending of paths, I think that you can blend any path that you feel worthy. You mean blend away. Because myself being, I'm an eclectic solitary witch, I blend a lot of different knowledge. I pull from different traditions that want to accomplish for the goal I want to accomplish. So I might include a little bit here and there because I think it strengthens, you know what I mean? Because different cultures, like I've said before, have different ways of doing the same thing. But like maybe I'm not pulling in a specific set of energy to help that in. So if I do, let's say, pull in some Native American with Celtic or whatever, if you pull that in, it's different energies, but it's achieving the same goal. So maybe that'll just strengthen, maybe they'll work together. Now, I don't think all the time they'll work together, but you know what I mean? For the most part, you can do stuff like that. That's just me. I think that blending paths is fine, but you have to remember, now this is going towards the other side of the fence, is that specific religions were set up a certain way, okay? So if you're Christian, it is against the religion to practice witchcraft and like mediumship, psychics, and stuff like that, right? And divination. It's against that religion. Now, that being like, I was just thinking about this the other day. So even though she's a Catholic, this Long Island medium, she is kind of a witch because according to her religion, that stuff would be considered witchcraft, right? Or that stuff is shunned, even if it's not considered witchcraft, it's still shunned, or what's the word? Heresy. So you see, so then if you're not following that religion, now I can understand how, like, there's different branches of Christianity. Obviously, there's Protestant and Catholicism, and I don't know, Methodist and all that kind of stuff. But they're all kind of doing. It's just a different idea of how they do the same thing. Their rules haven't changed. They're still using the Bible as their go-to book, and just the interpretation's different and stuff. So I can understand how there would be sub groups of that religion, okay? Just like with Wicca, there are traditions. There are set in stone traditions, Gardnerian, Alexandrian, Blue Star, just to name a few. But there's also, all of us out there that are solitary. And that's why I don't use the term Wiccan, even though I use a lot of Wiccan practices, because I don't feel like I follow enough of it total that, and I don't necessarily agree with all of it, that I don't consider myself even an eclectic Wiccan. I consider myself an eclectic witch, and some spiritual practices I use. You know what I mean? So I think where everyone's getting kind of hung up is this label, this Christo-Wiccan thing. Because when you pull from two different traditions that are totally opposite, you know what I mean? They don't go together. You can blend aspects, because I think a lot of the core beliefs are there, but they kind of also say, or at least Christianity says, you can't do this one. So what you're doing by blending paths is find if that works for you, but I don't think it's no longer either one. It's not a branch of Wicca, and it's not a branch of Christianity, because you pick and chose what you're using. It's a different label altogether. You know what I mean? Because neither side would claim that, because you're going against the rule. It's not a form of Wicca. It's not a form of Christianity. You're no longer following the rules of either. So it then becomes something different. And I think that's where everyone is getting all bent out of shape. It's about the label, which to me is not that big of a deal. It kind of describes what you're doing. I understand why it would be a descriptionary label. I practice Christo-Wiccan, or, you know what I mean, if you're explaining it that way, but it's not a tradition of Wicca, and it's not a subset of Christianity, as of yet. So what I'm saying about them getting hung up in the label is I think that word put together is putting off a lot of people, you know, because there are people that if I mean, I'm obviously not Gardnerian because, you know what I mean, I didn't study anyone, I didn't get initiated, I'm not in a coven, I'm not in Britain, all that kind of stuff. So there's rules for that in order to be that kind of person. You know what I mean? I think some people can probably say they follow Gardnerian Wicca and not be some of those things, but according to that group that was founded, you're not. So, you know what I mean? They're kind of at their rights to say that. You can use the label, but that doesn't mean you're using it correctly. I think as far as Christian Wicca goes, it's like describing to someone, if someone would say, what's your path? It's as describing words. Well, I use a little Christian and Christianity, and I use a little bit of Wicca. But you're not either of those, so you would be an eclectic, fill in the blank. Eclectic pagan, eclectic spiritualist. Come up with your own name. You know what I mean? I'm not really good at coming up with names, especially when it comes to that, because as I said before, I'm not a super religious person. As far as I can read and pick practices and understand why people do stuff, but I don't necessarily always believe their lore behind it. So I've always been one to not believe the dogma. And so, you know, I learned for myself. Blending in paths is awesome. And I feel like I'm repeating myself. I think blending is fine. But once you do that, you should come up with your own label or your own tradition, or use a more generic one that is just because if you think about it, Wicca is pulling from older beliefs too. You know what I mean? It's just a subset of in paganism. So if you're using only some of the practices, you're not Wiccan, but I'm not Wiccan, but I do use some of the practices. So I don't consider myself a eclectic Wicca. I don't have a tradition name that goes with Wicca, only because of that. You know what I mean? If I was hardcore and that was the only thing I was studying, and I did their one in a year and a day, and that was all I was studying, and following all of those guidelines, or I was in a coven, or like initiated, or did something like that, then yes, I would have no problem using the label. But since I'm doing way more than that, it's not. I feel for me, it's not correct to use that label. On the other hand, again, I think that labels like I can't think of his name right now because my mind is kind of racing. But labels are for soup cans kind of thing. He's from the pagan's perspective, and I should shoot myself in the face for not remembering his name. But he has said that before, that labels are for soup cans. And so the labels, I would say just do what feels right. But really when people get all hung up about you can't use that name, it's no one's really property. It's just a way of describing what you're doing. You know what I mean? So that's why I said as a descriptionary term, you're not a subset of Wicca. So you are not officially Christo Wicca. But you, as describing it to someone, you would say, I use Christianity and Wicca, or Wicca, right? Unless you're pulling from more sources too, and then you would include that. And if you are, then that would be like an eclectic pagan. So let me know what everyone thinks in the box below. I'm starting to run long and I start to repeat, and I was just trying to kind of play advocate and flip both sides of the coin, you know, how I see both sides. On one hand, I don't see that the label is that big of a deal, but on the other hand, I can see why it was a big deal to people that have studied Wicca or Christianity. You know what I mean? So to them, you're not either, because you're not following either one, and the two religions are contradict each other. On this hand, if it's just a label, and that's how you're describing your practice, I think it's kind of okay. But when did the two, you know, they're going to cross? You know what I mean? They're going to think this is a tradition versus a label, like a descriptionary label. You know what I mean? It's not a tradition, but it is your own personal tradition, right? It's your own personal thing. So I think that's where we start getting into, we're going to have a lot more of this blended label stuff, not with just those two, but I'm just talking in general, because people are pulling from different things and realizing that there is no one true way. You know what I mean? No matter how much religions preach that, we are, or at least I can speak for myself. Me using the term pagan and or eclectic witch, I can see past all this, you know, dogma and rule books of how to do stuff, because we've over the time have progressed and learned that there's no true one right way. So again, let me know what you think in the boxes below. Any questions or comments? I'll try to put the links to 2 of Lilokin's videos, as well as like the Pagan Perspective. I'll link their collab channel name, because all the hosts do a different their own take on it. So then it wasn't about Christian Wicca, it was about gods and mixing some pantheons, which is kind of in the same realm. But let me know. I hope to hear from you soon, and it's good to talk to everyone again. Blessed be.